So we've had a lot of rain here last 8 weeks. It's been incredible. So the garden is very green at the moment, and I'm just about to get out there and mow the lawn. But earlier this week got some vandas in from Orchid Garden, so could take a look at that, and after that I'm going to show how I transition them into glass vase culture. There's little chili plants there. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a look. Right, so this is primarily a vanda haul, courtesy of Orchid Garden in Poland. It's a pretty big box, so let's open it up and have a look what's inside. Oh boy, that looks like it's going to be a mess, doesn't it? Right, so I've rescued the vandas from all the cardboard packaging and got them out on the table now. And the first one which I'd like to show you is this Vanda Noporan White Diamond. So this one is a hybrid. I think this is the only hybrid in this haul, and it's a pretty good sized plant with a nice big root system, so very happy with that. And next to that we've got Vanda Marie from the Philippines, also a nice plant. This one's a bit smaller but still a pretty good size plant with a couple of little caikis down the bottom. Nice extensive root system there, very good. This is the other three vandas in the haul. So the one on the left is Vanda tessellata semi-alba, very interesting colour form of Vanda tessellata. I'll put the photo up from the website, what that one is looking like, but this also really a nice size plant, and we can see that apparently tessellata is not as large growing, or at least this particular cultivar, as some of the other vandas. And next to that we have Orchid lawrenceae, I should say. This is really one that I've been looking for a long time, and it's a really beautiful plant when in flower, and it actually has a flower spike on it. This is quite a large growing plant. It can get massive really, but probably won't get that large for me. In the northern hemisphere they don't grow as fast, I guess, but in the temperate zone I should say. But yeah, we can see nice long roots on that one as well. And another one here, Vanda cerulean pink. Oh my goodness, this one's also got a flower spike on it. So wow, two vandas with flower spikes on them. I really hope they're going to be able to hold on to their flower spikes after the transport, but these are really good plants, and this is a more compact plant as well. You can see the leaves are not that long, so that's yeah, nothing to complain about. Certainly space is always a premium, and especially these vandas tend to get pretty big, so if they're smaller growing to begin with, then that makes it a little bit easier. So that's 5 vandas, 4 of which species and 1 of which an orchids, so technically not a vanda but a vandoid. Yes, so I've got some glass vases ready, so I'm going to pot them up into the vases, and I'll show you what that looks like. But before we do that, I did have a couple of other plants in the haul as well. This one is the Brassia aquigera. And yeah, you can see something there which I don't really like to see, and that is namely a climbing rhizome on this plant. So the plant's always going to be trying to climb out of the pot no matter what you do. So it's like, yeah, don't like that. But yeah, these are also large growing plants, but I don't know, I've always liked the brassias, so I thought I'd give one another try. And then I've got a couple of little cattleyas here, so tiny little seedling of Cattleya maxima cerulean to add to the collection of Cattleya maximas. This will be the third one and the smallest one also, I dare say. And another one, this is a hybrid. It's a cross of two primary hybrids. It says, if I can read it, Saint Gothard, something like that. I'll look it up and put the picture up on that. But it's a very interesting cross. Like I say, I have two primary hybrids, unifoliate Cattleyas. Right, so the first one that I'm going to try to transition into the glass vase is Vanda tessellata. So this is quite a small plant, quite narrow, and the roots are not that big. But the first thing I'm going to do is just cut off any dead roots. Alright, so I just quickly trimmed off the dead roots, and just leave it in the little house is the advice, which I've heard from some of the expert growers in Florida. The commercial growers, they say don't take them out of the little house. They don't like that, so just leave it in there. And then we can just pot it into the glass vase. So this is a long, narrow one, which kind of matches the size and shape of the plant and the roots. Just point the roots in to the vase, and then eventually the leaves will actually support the plant. And I can see that this has got a green, no, it's not a green root tip, but it does have live roots on it. Some of the roots will tend to die off in the glass vase culture to begin with, but before long they usually start putting out nice big fat roots. That's been my experience anyway, so hopefully this will work out well. And yeah, in no time they develop quite an extensive root system. As far as watering the plant in this approach, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can fill the water up a third of the way, or halfway, or all the way, or you can just put a few drops in the bottom. And so I've been experimenting with different approaches, and what I really like to do is just put a few drops in the bottom and put it in a position where it's getting sunshine. When the sunshine hits the vase, the water starts to evaporate and creates a very humid atmosphere in the vase, and this is something which the vandas really like. So yeah, so that's kind of what I've, from trial and error, discovered to be, for me at least, a good approach. And maybe every now and then put in a bit more water, but when you put in more water you also need to carefully tip it out again. When you just put a few drops into the bottom, let's say half a centimetre of water, or less even, then with the sun shining on it, it will evaporate in a couple of days anyway, and as the roots develop, they'll start to drink up the water. So you can just observe and see how often you need to water with that approach. So that's the first one in his vase, and looks pretty good. Alright, so this next one is the Orchid lawrenceana, a larger plant with quite long roots, much longer than the pot. So I just very carefully twist it around. The roots have been soaked for some time, which makes them soft and flexible, so it can easily go in there, and the plant is just supporting itself on its leaves there, which perhaps not ideal, but in my experience not too much of a problem. As the roots grow, they will eventually support the plant, push it up a little bit and keep it firmly in place. But for now it's just sitting yeah, on the weight of itself on its leaves, and supporting itself in that manner. So this Vanda Plumpit Blue here, which is in flower at the moment, is a good example of the type of growth that you can get with this approach. So get some very big roots on it, nice big fat roots. And I'm going to move this now into a larger vase because I think it's outgrowing this one. It's getting a bit unstable. So I'm going to move it into a larger vase. So you can see the root system here. They've got a bit of green algae on them, but these roots are firm, they are alive, but there's not really any growth tips on them. So I think they would do better in a larger vase where it can get a bit more airflow over it. But yeah, these roots are all firm and they are alive. Right, so here it is in its new home. I did snap off one of the roots there. Unfortunately, I tried to feed some of the roots back down into the pot. Hopefully they will then continue to grow into the bottom of the pot. But you can see this plant is supporting itself pretty well. It did get yellow tips on the leaves while I was away on holiday for a few weeks. When I came back, it had yellow leaf tips. I'm not sure exactly what the cause is, if it's a lack of vitamin or too much sunshine or maybe a bit of both. But you can see the new leaf growth there. It's a big leaf, so I think it's generally pretty happy. Probably just needs maybe a little bit of a boost of fertilizer to get a bit of colour back into the leaves, but it's got lots of strong leaf and root growth, so this plant is very happy with this style of culture. But yeah, transitioning them into a new vase that is can be a little bit stressful as well, can set them back a little bit. So we can take a look at another plant. This is one which I transitioned earlier this year, and I don't know how well you can see it there, but it now has lots of root tips growing in the larger vase. It was also in a smaller vase, and it's looking happier. But when I first put it in there, I think it was in March or something like that, about 6 months ago. Wasn't too happy for a while, but eventually the roots started growing, and I think it's doing well now. Right, so there's the group photo of the 5 vandas or vandoids that have all now been transitioned into their glass vases, and looking pretty good, I would say. Try to match the vase to the size of the plant and the root system. Now I'm also privileged to be in possession of this book by Martin Motes, Natural Genus Vanda. So some of these plants are described in there, so let's take a quick look at what he says about each one and try to figure out how that might translate into the culture. Right, so the first one we'll take a look at is the hybrid Vanda Noporn White Diamond Pink Lip. So I looked this one up on Orchid Roots, and it's 75% Sandriana. And if we look on the book, there are some of the colour forms of Sandriana, but this one is just, this hybrid is white. It doesn't have the two-tone effect of Sandriana. As far as the culture goes, what Mr. Motes says is that Hawaiian breeders had succeeded in producing hybrids that resemble Vanda Sandriana in shape, but in a broader range of colour. Unfortunately, they had also produced plants which inherited Sandriana's large size, slow growth and maturity, and inherited intolerance for cold, all qualities which made such hybrids unsuitable for temperate greenhouses and commercially unfeasible. So that does fill me a little bit with trepidation for this one, considering it is 75% Sandriana, but hopefully being a more modern hybrid, it will somewhere along the line have gotten a little bit less picky in terms of its culture, but for sure this is one which would like a lot of heat. So this species is endemic to Mindanao in the Philippines, near the equator, from sea level to 500 meters. Only Vanda caerulea in the genus can rival Vanda Sandriana for spectacular beauty, which is a very good segue into the next plant, which is none other than Vanda caerulea, the pink form. and it's got a bud on it. I'm not quite sure how many flowers, 1 or 2 or 3, not many I don't think. It's quite small plant still. So let's have a look at what he says about Vanda caerulea. Right, so what he says about caerulea is that it ranges in colour from deep blue to white. Many varieties have been noted, but of which 3 varieties are described botanically: Forma delicata, Luangalba and Rogersii. Delicata is the pink form, was already described in 1925, is pink overall with darker pink tessellation. And because it comes true to seed, it is available horticulturally. So that's what we're looking at here. Luangalba is a different one again, white with pale blue on the apices of the sepals and petals, and is hence not a true alba. That one sounds like it's quite rare. And then finally we have Rogersii, which I will just turn the page. Pale, nearly white colour form of the species, which has emerged with some frequency historically. There are also true alba forms of Vanda caerulea. I don't want to read the whole thing. I mean, obviously, you should buy the book if you really want to know. What he does mention, if you read through a little bit, is that the petals of Vanda caerulea, the wild petals, the wild plants, the petals twist 180 degrees. So if we look at that alba one there, I guess that's an example of the twisting of the petals. But I think there's some doubt as to whether these plants, which emerged in the 1970s, were true species. What he mentions is that the true lineage of many hybrids is unclear on whether they're hybrids or not. So caerulea is one of the ones which really a lot of confusion and almost impossible to know which ones are coming from species, which ones are hybrids, and so forth. But so there's quite some different forms. There's a nice picture of a nice specimen plant there in flower. Yeah, this one's pretty common in cultivation. So one of the things that Mr. Motes does mention is that the true species are quite narrow plants, and this is quite a narrow plant, so this could indeed be a true species. What he doesn't specifically say in the description here is that it's regarded as one of the cooler growing vandas, but he does mention that the distribution is quite widespread from northeast India, Burma and southern China to Thailand, Laos and Vietnam at 800 meters to 2000 meters. So obviously getting up over 1500 meters, it's going to be experiencing quite cool nighttime temperatures. So this one is usually regarded as a little bit cooler growing than most vandas. So the next one we can take a look at is Vanda tessellata, variation semi-alba. So if we look again at what Motes has to say about tessellata, it's a very widespread species with a lot of different colour forms. So it's from India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Vietnam, China, the Himalayas. He mentions distinctive forms, distinctive colour forms, various subspecies, and there's some more different colour forms here. And this again is a lowland vanda, so it would be a warmer growing vanda at sea level to 500 meters. Southern India is also mentioned there. Yeah, so I think just fairly standard vanda culture for this one. The leaves on this plant appear to be fairly narrow, which often is an indication of more light tolerance, that it can take a higher light. So there is some variation within the vandas as to how much light they can take. Some can take pretty much direct sunlight for most of the day or for many hours. Others prefer to be a bit more in the shade. This looks like it might be one of the ones that can take a bit more light. So this next species is Vanda from Mindanao in the Philippines, and this is a species that has been more recently described by Martin Motes himself in 2016. It was previously thought to be a variety of Vanda limbata, which I think has a different distribution. So I guess it has in common with Sandriana that Mindanao, if I recall correctly, both coming from the same area. So this will undoubtedly also be a warm, lowland growing species, and the photo on the right there is of a more richly coloured flower, and then here you have the more typically coloured orange-red flowers. And this is sort of a smaller stature vanda, not as big as some of the others, according to the what's written in the book, which is good. So the final orchid or vandoid, not actually a vanda as such, in this haul is a Reedy's Lawrenceae. This one is not in the book because it's not a vanda, and the book is for vandas only, so it's not in the book, but it is a very beautiful species. And this one is also from Mindanao in the Philippines. So that's it. I got 3 plants from Mindanao without even realizing it. Quite a warm, sweaty location, I can imagine. Lowland tropical climate in the Philippines. No doubt also very high precipitation there. But I will just be treating them all pretty much the same as my other vandas, which are doing okay. I do have the option to put them into the greenhouse in summer if I want them to be warmer, so I might try that with a couple, see how they go. But yeah, the main recipe for these plants is warm throughout the year, so not getting too cool in the winter especially. Lots of good light, some direct sunlight, possibly not too much. If you look at the large leaves on this one, they probably would burn if there's too much direct light, but certainly you want good light throughout the year. And the advantage of having them in these glass vases is you can simulate these conditions in your house. Even if you're living in a temperate climate, as I am in the Netherlands. I put them in a south-facing window, like I said, with a little bit of water added every now and then in the bottom, which evaporates and simulates that steamy tropical climate with the sun coming in. It heats up, it creates a little microclimate in the glass vase. That's essentially what you're aiming for with this mode of culture, and this is a way of being able to grow these beautiful plants somewhere where you would imagine that it might not be possible, but I've been very pleased to discover in the last years that this approach seems to work, and I'm going to now try out some perhaps a little bit more challenging plants, some species. So that's the next step in the evolution for me with vandaculture. So if you've got any ideas or suggestions or comments, please leave them, and I'll be happy to respond. Thanks for watching.